So Scream 5 is apparently filming right now, and I've already given you a good reason not to get hyped for this film, but with Scream 5 on the way, it seemed like a very good time to look at an old mystery in the Scream series, namely, what was the original ending of Scream 2? Let's set the scene. It is 1996 and Scream has been released to massive commercial success and massive critical success. And cleverly, it came out around Christmas time when horror fans are kind of hungry and there's not really much for us in the cinema. Now, traditionally for me, that was a time to go into Blockbuster and absolutely stock up on VHS tapes, but I digress there. So Miramax obviously wanted a sequel and they wanted it ASAP. Now, Kevin Williamson, the writer and creator of Scream, had handily produced 2 outlines for sequels at the same time that he produced the script for Scream. This enables Kevin Williamson to have a lot of the script written by March 1997. However, in June 1997, in what would become a recurrent headache for studios, that script leaks onto the internet. So the story goes Kevin Williamson goes into extensive rewriting mode to come up with a new ending. And that is what I am interested in. What was the original ending for Scream 2? Because that is not as simple as you might think. Because Kevin Williamson would have you believe it is not the version that is on the internet. As recently as 2017, Kevin Williamson was claiming that the script that leaked was not a genuine script, but was one of several dummy drafts that he produced to throw would-be spoilers off the scent. And this has bothered me for ages because if the leak wasn't real, what was the original ending? Now, writers use setups and payoffs in their scripts. You set things up that foreshadow things that will later develop. That's just good writing. But when the plans change, your script can be full of vestigial elements, sort of holdovers from old ideas that look weird and out of place. You might see something and think, well, hang on, why is that there? That never comes up again, that's odd. A good example of this is the blood that's on Aragorn's sword here in Return of the King, which shouldn't be there, but is explained by an extended scene in the extended editions. A more horror-relevant example would be the numerous hints in Buffy season 2 or 3 that Xander is gay or bisexual, something that never came to pass because Joss Whedon changed his mind about which character should turn out to be gay. So knowing that the original ending changed, you can watch Scream 2 with an eye to working out what these vestigial elements are, what might be a holdover from the original ending. So one example might be this duo played by Portia de Rossi and Rebecca Gayheart, who would later be amazing in Urban Legend. Maybe they always were red herrings, I don't know, but I wonder. What about the plot point with the initial victims in Scream 2 sharing the name of a victim in Scream? Now, that plot point is really interesting, but it is abandoned the second it is discovered. Now, why would that happen? Was there a great plan for this? Why did they change tack here, you wonder? We've heard from Kevin Williamson, so let's see if someone else can shed some light. How about Wes Craven?
And then Kevin sent us, I think something like 30 pages by email. We read it. It was fabulous. It was on the internet in its entirety that night. And all those you little fuckers out there that think that's really cute, you fucking ruined our next 3 months.
Now, Wes Craven says in 2010 that for Scream 2 they had the first 40 pages of the script show up on the internet the night that they arrived from Kevin Williamson, and they had to do backflips to rewrite the opening. Rewrite the opening? What? Hang on, they rewrote the opening? They rewrote the opening, but the whole victims sharing names thing was set up in the opening. That's odd. Why did that happen? Let's hear a little more from Wes Craven.
That script went through a lot of changes, and I can remember writing sessions when Kevin was already off working on his television show at the time, where we would have 6 people in a room trying to brain check each other because you get a plot line worked out for, say, the second half of the second act, and then, oh no, we can't because she was there and you can't, therefore you can't. So it's like, a lot of trying to figure out plot points and things in the middle of shooting, which is another thing that comes from people screwing up your script.
Now looking at this, that is confirmation that we had a huge amount of rewriting. That is relevant and interesting. We hear a similar story about the rewriting from Jerry O'Connell, the star of Scream 2, and also Miramax producer Cary Grant. So we've got a whole lot of people behind the scenes agreeing that in Scream 2 these scripts were not finished and they were being hastily rewritten. Now that leaves me wondering, if the leaked script was a dummy script, as Kevin Williamson claimed, then why have all this business with the rewrites that cause a massive headache for the director, producer and cast? You know, it really gets the old noggin jogging. Now, the only thing that makes sense for me that can square this circle is that Kevin Williamson is talking a load of nonsense. And I'm being polite there, but you don't need to do all these hasty rewrites if the leaked script was fake. How does that make any sense? So if Kevin Williamson is talking rubbish and the actual ending genuinely was leaked, then we have to ask, what was that ending? Well, spoilers, guys. I'll let you in on a little secret here. It was garbage. So in the leaked script, Mickey and Mrs. Loomis are still the killers. That seems to have always been the plan. But joining them are Sydney's boyfriend, Derek, and roommate, Hallie. Yeah, that's a lot. Now, aside from making William of Ockham spin in his grave, it's a terrible misstep. And I know this is kind of weird to say, but it kind of seems like the writer doesn't understand the series. Now, the beauty of Scream is that Scream is an in-genre critique. It is following a decade of hastily produced derivative sequels to great horror series. Scream calls out all the faults that were being made in horror films at the time. Specifically, it calls out faults in slasher films that were being made in the late 80s and early 90s, and also provides a sterling example of how to do a good slasher film. That is what I mean by being an amazing in-genre critique. You can stand outside of any genre and point out the flaws in it, but what I think is much more interesting and challenging is to call out those flaws, but also show how something can work well. That is much more demanding, and it is a heck of a lot more interesting. That is what Scream did. So Scream 2 obviously has to address the issue of horror sequels and their issues specifically, which this does, but you're not making an in-genre critique if you are just replicating the faults of those sequels. So Randy calls out ridiculous escalation and sort of raising of the scale in sequels as a problem. But if you have 4 killers, you're guilty of that. There's not a critique of it, that is replicating it. You know, you're going to get to a point where it's like, who isn't the killer? And has anyone done that yet? That would be interesting. Have I called it? Has someone done it? Now, I'm not just dunking on Scream 2. There are good in-genre critiques in there. Let's look at the example of the opening, which is a really good opening for the series, and it is very smart. The opening is an amazing rebuttal to the
carnage candy
escalation that Randy says we are expecting. And it rebuts this by making Maureen's death here agonizing and upsetting. She's just suffering in front of a rabid crowd of horror fans, and it's asking us, the audience, if we're satisfied with her suffering. That is a perfect in-genre critique. And there is another moment of original brilliance later. You might have seen a thing about the fridge brilliance of Shaun of the Dead or The World's End, where a funny monologue at the start of the film actually foreshadows the entire plot. Scream 2 kind of got there first. Watch Randy give his rules for horror sequel spiel.
How do we find the killer, Randy? That's what I want to know.
Oh, let's look at the suspects. There's Derek, the obvious boyfriend. Hello, Billy Loomis. The guy's pre-med and his pity me surface wound conveniently missed every major vein and artery. Boyfriend, it's tired. Who else do we got?
There's
Mickey, the freaky Tarantino film student.
Hey, let's move on to
Hallie.
Sid's roommate.
How about Gail Weathers?
Gail?
She's an opportunist. Isn't it conceivable she's planning her next book? That's what reporters do, Dewey. They stage the news.
He accurately names every one of the original killers in the leaked script. Well, okay, kind of. He names Gail Weathers as a suspect, but more importantly, he does that because he says reporters should be suspects. And, well, then you have Debbie Salt, who is posing as a reporter. Randy accurately leads you to exactly where you should be looking. Now, that's kind of brilliant if the original ending is the leaked ending. So again, I have to call BS on Kevin Williamson here. That leaked ending, I believe that was the original one. That is the correct ending, albeit it was kind of rubbish. Randy's moment of brilliance aside, 4 killers is kind of stupid, and it is you replicating the excess of sequels without critiquing it. It's more parody than critique. It would have been a mistake. And yeah, I guess that leaves us just saying, good job, leakers, you know. Thank you, internet. Your anti-copyright actions actually made Scream 2 a better film. Well done. I hope you found that interesting. That is all from me this week. The next video is going to be another Fails from the Crypt. I think you'll enjoy it a whole bunch. And then after that, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to be doing an episode-by-episode review of The Haunting of Bly Manor when it comes out on the 4th of October. So please do subscribe if you haven't already. I am a tiny channel, so every new subscriber is an absolute delight. I would love to be hitting 500 soon. That would be amazing. Thank you all so much, and cheers, y'all.
Real Horror Show.